Welcome! You're listening to Making Relationships Work. We're a company focused on women and their marriage. We lead and teach women just like you how to grow into and access, whenever you need to, your wise woman's self. The part of you who is deeply connected to your purpose, your innate wisdom, and your husband and family. We teach women in marriages how to rebuild trust and connection, to work through conflicts no matter how deep, no matter how painful, and to lead your marriage to a place where the two of you experience marriage mastery. This podcast is about learning the systems and techniques that truly work to reconnect you back into your marriage so that you can experience the freedom that comes with a masterful marriage. Since this podcast is totally free, if you're getting tons of value and you want to support us and make sure that you get more of this good stuff, subscribe below and rate and review our podcast today. Now, on to the show. Hello, Women Making Marriages Work. Hello, Making Relationships Work podcast and our YouTube channel. It is so nice to be back here with you tonight. We are going to be talking about something that is a thread among 90% of the questions that I get asked. Most women talk to me about husbands who won't talk to them. Most of the time, these women have very good intentions, are loving and kind, and are trying to show leadership. And sometimes they're frustrated. Sometimes they're angry. Sometimes they're genuinely kind of connected and together. And it seems to them that no matter what they do, they can't influence or get a reaction out of their husbands. And they say to me, well, what am I supposed to do? He won't talk to me. He just shuts down. He gives me one-word answers. He tells me this is just how it is. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. And so the issues get moved aside, and the argument is about sharing versus not sharing. Do we have a problem versus do we not have a problem? And this conversation is one that does a lot of damage in a marriage. So there's a pattern here where there's this sense that women in general are more talkative and men in general are less talkative. And culturally, you could say, yes, there's probably some merit in that. There's also some individual differences. Some people are oversharers, some people are undersharers, and some kind of sit in the middle. This conversation that you and I are having, though, is not about individual differences. It's about connection, because you can be an undersharer or an oversharer and still have a happy marriage. You don't have a happy marriage, though, when you can't connect and talk about what's important to talk about, where you can't get on the same page that we do in fact have a problem here. And this problem is something that's hurting you in this way and me in this way. And if we don't work it out, there's going to be consequences to that. Now, do you hear the energy that I put in that last phrase? It's not a threat. If we don't work it out, there's going to be consequences. It's more of an understanding that with you and me, if there's a problem between us and we avoid it or it's not resolved, it's going to be something that hurts us and builds momentum in a direction we don't want to go. And so we will work together to figure this out. That's what a couple in a space of marriage mastery looks and sounds and feels like. And so if we go right back to the beginning of where I kind of started this conversation with you, I started by saying we have a common thread of complaints. About 90% of women will say to me, I will talk to my husband won't talk to me. And the curious part about this is that this is not about the personality of the husband, and it's not about an enduring kind of psychological construction normally. It's more about a learned response. Your husband has had one of two things usually. One is he doesn't know how to do it because it wasn't modeled to him in his family of origin, or is not modeled to him in his work environment now. and probably third part of the first is probably not well set out in how to be successful in terms of talking about hard things in his marriage or family. Okay, so there is a learned component here. The other part is I don't know how to do it, or I don't feel confident to do it. I don't feel confident that whatever's going to be brought up, that I know how to handle, that I know what to do with next, that I can solve or feel strength in myself to be able to walk through this alongside you. And I've tried in the past and I felt unsuccessful in the past. And so now I just don't go there. And so we've got two different things which really sit well together, don't they? So if you are talking about a husband, and it can very easily be a wife here, yes? It's just that I work mainly with women. And so I'm hearing the woman's perspective. But there are probably just as many women who suffer and struggle in this space as there are men. And so what we want to talk about is what happens when you're in this block where one of you wants to work it out and the other one doesn't have the skills or doesn't have the confidence in themselves to know that they can work it out, and so avoids one-word answers, kind of those conversational patterns where you start off talking about one thing and you end up so far off target, or you end up caught in a trap of resistance where you're suddenly now fighting about the other one's defenses. Yeah, you know the ones. And so we need to work out how to intercept that. Because if you don't change that dynamic in a marriage where there's a problem and one or both of you don't have the skills, don't have the experience, don't have the sense of being successful in navigating those harder or difficult conversations, then what happens is you avoid those difficult conversations. You blame someone else for where the two of you are. You justify it and kind of minimize it and write it off. You defend yourself. You criticize the other person. You then build contempt for the other person. And so all of this is to say that sitting in a space where you both don't have the skills or the confidence or the kind of sense of we can make this work, we can figure this out together if we just both show up in a certain way. When that's missing, what happens is it erodes the goodwill, the sense of friendship, the sense of belonging to each other, the sense of us against the world starts to erode. And when that starts to erode, you start to become more and more separate. So instead of being kind of this shared friendship, this shared marriage, this shared relationship, you start to have to put up walls to look after yourself, to keep yourself safe. And you might find that you get closer with your children and less close with your partner. And you might find your partner is more about sports or work or his mates, his friends, or his kid-related interactions. And really what we're still talking about is two people who can't have what they consider to be a hard conversation, where they talk about what life's like for them, and the other one can receive that. And then together they work on, well, what do we do about it? And so when we start to notice this separation, the research shows us that it's about 6 years that couples will fight to kind of still keep coming back together, even though they've got a build-up of pain or resentment or upset or blame or hurt or frustration or jealousy or anger. They'll keep trying. And then at some point around 6 years, they hit a tipping point and it becomes ultimatum time. If we can't work this out, then I don't like this and I don't want to live with it. I think someone else would be better for me. I can imagine that I'm more lovable through someone else's eyes than through your eyes. And this is the point that women start calling me. and they say, we can't talk about hard things. He won't even respond to me now. He might text me one-word answers. We can talk about kids or co-parenting, but we can't talk about ourselves. We certainly can't talk about our marriage. As soon as I talk about my marriage, the walls go up and it's over. So how am I supposed to do anything with this? I still want to be married. I can see what I've done. I can see what he has done, but I can't get near him. And so if you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, don't pause and kind of put up with it. It never ends well. It doesn't resolve itself by itself. You won't find that suddenly your husband starts talking to you. Suddenly, magically, he builds a skill set where he can practice speaking with you, and then you understand where he is and you know how to respond. These kinds of things are fantasy-based kind of conversations or hopes we have in our head that it's just going to get better and it's going to just get better one day. And somehow the two of you are going to get the kind of upgrade that you need in terms of skills and understanding to be able to do it differently. So it's going to be okay. That's not going to happen. The other thing that's not going to happen is it's not just going to get easier because the kids are getting older. There's always a level of pressure on a marriage. Always. Maybe in retirement it's a bit less, but I'll tell you what, it's still very similar. It's actually quite different, but there's a pressure on a marriage always. Let's just stay with that. And so this phase of life you're in, maybe you've got young kids, maybe you've got middle schooly kind of aged kids, wherever you are in your life kind of cycle, it's not getting easier because you're getting older or because the stress is reducing. It only gets easier when you increase your skill set. You know this. I know this. But when it comes to our marriage, we tell ourselves stories all the time. When it comes to our own development and growth, we tell ourselves stories all the time. And most of them are about how we're pretty good and that person's pretty not good. But that's not going to serve you in your marriage either. It's not. And so if you're listening to this and you're saying, oh, actually, we've got a really similar pattern in our marriage. Yes, we do. And you're thinking, okay, well, I can just leave it a bit longer. You can, by the way, but it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. You're just going to have more to work on at some point. But if you decide, okay, let me commit to myself, to telling myself truthful stories rather than ones that serve my sense of self-esteem. Let me hear my own truth and wisdom. And let me understand that between the two of us, it's very unlikely that my husband's going to be the one who comes home with access to a range of competencies and skills. It's most likely going to be me. I have a lot of women kind of haters about how I talk about this one way that you can influence a marriage into a different space. They talk about how it should be two people. And I get that. In an ideal world, it would be. But if I didn't create something that allowed women to influence and lead in a marriage in a way that's really good for them and really good for their husbands and really good for their families, then who would be? And so my job is to teach you how to get reconnected to your husband so the two of you can work it through together. Yeah? That's how I do it. And so if you're waiting around for your husband to find a version of this, I'll tell you now, it doesn't exist. So it's really unlikely. If you're waiting around for him to have an epiphany and to come home and say, honey, I want to work this out with you, it's probably happened already in a way that wasn't successful. And I mean that with such love, because if it was successful, you wouldn't be here. And probably he didn't know how to do it much differently. And he was met by you and you had a lot of anger and blame and fury and let down and hurt, perhaps some bitterness and jealousy to work through. And that felt like a lot for your beautiful husband. And he said, that didn't work. And so he gave up. And so this is the bumpy start to understanding that this is a skill set issue. This is not something that goes away. This is something that needs to be designed, understood with love and care and authenticity and support and connection. And from that place, we can build anything, including your dream marriage. So if you are listening to this and this is really resonating with you, there's two things you can do. The first thing is you can watch my masterclass. I'll pop it in the comments below. The second thing you can do is you can book a free call with me and my team. We'll get you really clear on what's working, what's not working, and we'll be able to build you a strategy for where to go from here. So that's the answer. The answer is you are the change that you're waiting for. Your husband's not coming. This isn't getting better by itself. It's never going to get better unless one of you does something. And in his own mind, your husband has tried, and in your own mind, you have tried. But what you haven't tried is this. So I want you to watch that masterclass. Feel free to book a call. And then I want you to start with the energy and commitment that you have for your husband. I want it to kind of reflect where the two of you started from when you got married, when you met each other. That type of energy and love is the energy and love you want to bring to working through where you are right now. Because yes, it's hard. And yes, it hurts. And yes, you've tried. Of course you have. You're beautiful. So is your husband. But it's not worked. So we need something new, which means you've got to dig deep and you've got to get going. So masterclass, call. I'll talk to you soon. You can do this. I promise. Talk to you later. Bye, loves. Thank you for tuning into today's show. If you're feeling fired up and you're ready to grow and you want to know more about how to do that, here is what I want you to do now. I want you to watch my marriage masterclass. This masterclass will show you how my clients have turned their struggling marriages into thriving marriages, even without their husband's buy-in. How my clients have gone from cycles of poor communication, disconnect and loneliness to being teammates and soulmates with their husbands again, even after they've already tried everything. And the proven system my clients use to start transforming their marriages in minutes, not years, because life is too precious to waste one more minute in an unhappy and unfulfilling marriage. So if this is what you're looking for, I want you to click the link below and take a look at my masterclass.